I watched them all the time. I think I watched Indiana State and Iowa. Caitlin Clark play about the same last year, so I watched a lot of basketball.
Like, can we get Caitlin Clark a little protection out?
Picture this. A legend of the game watching the most talented young star in women's basketball get targeted, and not by accident. That's exactly what happened, and it's why Larry Bird's fiery words about Brittney Griner's hit on Caitlin Clark have shaken the entire sport. Here's a question for you. Have you ever seen an athlete get singled out the way Caitlin Clark has this season? After watching that Connecticut Sun game, Larry Bird sees the WNBA differently now. And what he said next, it hit Brittney Griner right where it hurts. Bird knows this feeling firsthand. Back in the 80s, when players couldn't outplay him, some tried to intimidate him instead. But Bird drew a hard line between old-school physical rivalry and what he just watched happen to Clark. His words were blunt. The most cowardly thing I've seen on a basketball court in years. Yeah, you heard that right. If you're enjoying this, hit like and subscribe. 83% of you watching haven't yet, and it costs nothing but means everything to this channel. Already subscribed. Appreciate you. Now, back to the story.
While this is taking place, Brittney Griner comes out and says, I am so sick and tired of the WNBA. It used to be a peaceful, small little thing. Now there's crowds screaming, hollering. This is disruptive. It's not allowing us to play the game. This is her quote. I don't know if you saw this or not.
Imagine watching a rookie get blindsided from behind, in front of millions, and then hearing one of the toughest, smartest players to ever step on a basketball court call it out in real time. That's exactly what happened when Larry Bird saw the footage of Brittney Griner shoving Caitlin Clark. And what he said next didn't just spark a conversation. It lit a fire across the entire basketball world. Think about who we're talking about here. This is a man who spent his career going toe-to-toe with some of the most feared enforcers the game has ever produced. Guys like Bill Laimbeer and Dennis Rodman. Players built to make life miserable for their opponents. If anyone understood what real, hard-nosed competitive basketball looked like, it was Larry Bird. So when a player with that kind of resume looks at a moment and says something feels wrong, people listen. And that's precisely what happened. Bird watched that shove, and even with everything he'd survived in his own career, he couldn't call it fair competition. What he saw broke basketball's unwritten code, the line between playing hard and playing dirty. Before we go further, if you're finding this interesting, go ahead and hit subscribe now. It helps more than you'd think, and it's completely free. Now, back to what Bird actually said. Here's the point Bird raised that so many fans have quietly thought, but nobody with his kind of platform had actually said out loud. There's a massive difference between playing lockdown defense and taking a cheap shot at someone who isn't even looking. One is basketball. The other is a sucker punch dressed up as physicality. Bird pointed out that his own era is remembered as the most brutal stretch in NBA history. Guys were elbowing, shoving, fighting for every inch. But even in that environment, there was a code. If you had a problem with someone, you looked them in the eye and you dealt with it like a competitor, not like you're waiting for their back to turn so you can strike when they can't see it coming. That distinction is exactly why Bird found Griner's actions so hard to stomach. And it didn't stop there. What Bird said afterward reportedly landed even harder on Griner's reputation than the shove itself. The veteran star, according to Bird, handled the entire situation in a way he found genuinely disappointing. Rather than owning what happened or admitting she might have crossed a line, Griner reportedly suggested she was being unfairly targeted by fans and the media no matter what she did, essentially framing herself as the one under attack. And that response, more than the shove, is apparently what really set Bird off. Because according to Bird, the truly great competitors, the legends, the champions, the players who define an era, always own their actions, even the ugly ones, even when someone could have genuinely gotten hurt. Watching a player dodge accountability and play the victim reminded him of something specific. Athletes who know, deep down, that they can't compete at the highest level anymore, and instead of accepting that, they start looking for other ways to stay relevant. In other words, Bird basically suggested that Griner reached for an underhanded tactic because she couldn't match the skill level required to compete the right way. That's about as pointed a critique as you'll hear from someone of his stature. Now here's where things get really interesting, because this is where Bird's comments shift from criticism into something closer to admiration, and it's all about Caitlin Clark. Bird said Clark has the exact traits that made him one of the greatest to ever play the game. Elite basketball IQ, the ability to hit shots in moments when everyone else tightens up, and a court vision that makes everyone around her better. High praise, especially coming from him. But Bird, being someone who clearly still cares about the integrity of the sport, also flagged something that genuinely worries him. Instead of a 22-year-old being able to just focus on maximizing an insane amount of raw talent, she constantly has to be on alert, watching for cheap shots, bracing for dirty plays, staying aware in ways most athletes never have to think about. According to Bird, what Griner did represents everything wrong with a certain mentality in sports, choosing to target a player physically instead of putting in the work to match her skill or simply outplay her through preparation and effort. The fact that Clark keeps getting hit in her most vulnerable moments, when she's not expecting contact, is a pattern Bird says he finds deeply troubling. He went as far as calling it the most cowardly thing he's witnessed on a basketball court in years. That's not a soft statement. That's about as blunt as criticism gets from a Hall of Famer. It's worth noting Bird didn't just criticize from a distance. He connected it to his own experience. He compared what Clark is going through to his own run-ins with physical intimidation during his playing days. But he was also quick to add context that actually elevates just how impressive Clark's situation really is. At only 22 years old, she's dealing with more pressure and scrutiny than most players ever face across an entire career, and she's doing all of it while essentially carrying the label of the face of women's basketball on her shoulders every single night. Then Bird said something about Griner's standing in the league that immediately started trending. He argued that if the WNBA allows players to target its biggest stars without real consequences, it's sending a dangerous message that average players can rely on questionable tactics to stay relevant instead of actually improving their game. Bird believes this sets a risky precedent, one that could end up punishing the very players who are raising the overall level of competition in the league. He even brought kids into the conversation, saying that young viewers watching at home deserve to see basketball as a lesson in skill, discipline, and respect, not a lesson in how to target your toughest opponent when the refs aren't looking. But here's the part of Bird's comments that might matter most: his prediction for what happens next with Clark, despite everything working against her. Bird believes adversity like this doesn't break players like her, it builds them. Every cheap shot, every questionable play, every attempt to rattle her only strengthens her resolve to prove she can dominate purely through skill. He compared it directly to his own rookie season, when opponents physically tested him just to see if he'd crack under pressure. The difference, Bird pointed out, is that Clark isn't just dealing with physical tests. She's doing it while facing a level of media attention and outside pressure that's completely unprecedented for a player this early in her career. And that's really what makes Bird's support for Clark so significant. He's not just defending one talented young athlete. He's defending something bigger, the actual spirit of the game. In his eyes, Clark represents everything that makes basketball worth watching: talent, vision, competitiveness, and class. And on the flip side, he sees players like Griner, in this specific instance, as a warning sign for everything that could damage the sport if it goes unchecked. Bird didn't hold back on framing this as a defining moment for the league either. He said the WNBA is essentially standing at a fork in the road. One path: keep allowing lesser tactics to slide, letting players target stars instead of earning their spot through performance. The other path: actively protect and elevate the league's top talent, giving players like Clark the room to reach their full potential, which in turn lifts the entire league. According to Bird, whichever path the WNBA chooses will shape its future for years to come. So now the real question everyone's asking is this: will the league actually take Bird's warning seriously and step in to protect its biggest star, or will moments like this keep happening with little to no consequence? That's the debate happening right now across basketball circles everywhere, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. Zoom out for a second, because this isn't really about one shove, one hard foul, or one heated moment anymore. This has turned into a much bigger conversation about the direction of women's basketball, what standards the league wants to set, and how it treats its most important players once the spotlight gets this intense. Very few athletes in sports history have walked into a league facing the kind of expectations Clark had before she even played her first professional game. Every single possession she's involved in gets watched, replayed, and picked apart. Every big shot gets celebrated everywhere. Every rough moment becomes a headline. That's simply what it means to be one of the most talked about names in basketball right now. At the same time, you've got seasoned veterans across the league who bring real experience, grit, and pride to every single game. And that competitive fire is exactly what makes the WNBA must-watch basketball. The challenge the league faces is making sure that fire never crosses into something reckless or dangerous. Fans want intensity. Fans want real rivalries. They want basketball that feels raw and competitive, but they also want fairness, safety, and consistency in how the game is officiated and protected. That's exactly why Bird's comments carry so much weight. This isn't a random commentator throwing out hot takes. This is someone who lived through some of the most physical basketball ever played and still drew a clear line at what he saw. His message wasn't really about toughness at all. It was about protecting the integrity of the sport, making sure skill and competition stay the headline instead of controversy. And whether you agree completely with Bird or think this whole situation is being blown out of proportion, there's no denying the conversation it's created. Fans, analysts, former players, media personalities, everyone's weighing in on where the line should be drawn when a league's biggest stars become targets for physical play. Should officials be stricter? Should punishments be harsher? Or is this simply part of playing at the highest level? Depending on who you ask, you'll get a completely different answer. What's not up for debate, though, is how Clark has responded through all of it. Instead of letting the noise, the physicality, or the criticism define her, she's kept doing exactly what got her here. Showing up, competing hard, and letting her game speak for itself. That kind of composure under this much pressure is a big reason her fan base keeps growing by the day. And it's happening at a moment when the WNBA is getting more attention than maybe ever before. Arenas are selling out. Television ratings keep climbing. Social media conversations grow every single day. New fans are discovering women's basketball for the very first time, which means moments like this don't just affect one player or one team. They shape how the entire league is perceived on a global scale. As the season rolls on, every single game is going to carry more weight. Every matchup involving Clark will be watched closely. Every contested play will be broken down frame by frame. Every officiating decision will be debated. And every single one of those games is adding another chapter to what's already shaping up as one of the most talked about seasons in WNBA history. So here's what it really comes down to. Do you think Bird's comments accurately capture what's happening in the league right now? Do you think the WNBA is doing enough to let competitive basketball thrive while still protecting its biggest stars? And what do you think all of this means going forward for Clark, for Griner, and for the league as a whole? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This community always brings solid perspective, and your take might genuinely shape where this conversation goes next. If you want more breakdowns like this, real analysis that cuts through the noise on everything happening around the WNBA, basketball legends, and Caitlin Clark, make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications, and don't miss what's coming next. Because trust me, the next chapter of this story might end up being even bigger than this one. See you in the next video.